the lowest point in my professional life. I didn't know whether I wanted to be captain anymore. I didn't even know if I wanted to play footy anymore. We sat down and it initially just started with, what are we even doing? The reality is we're probably not going to taste the ultimate success in our time at the footy club. You saying that about me makes me feel uncomfortable.
That you're a Brownlow medalist?
I always reference it as a token Brownlow medalist.
Right, you do.
And I don't know whether that's me struggling to accept what happened.
And when you walk off the ground and you don't think you've given your best, how did you deal with that as a professional athlete?
I felt guilty. I carried heaps of shame.
They're strong words, guilt and shame.
But I think that was the pressure that I put on myself. And I think I valued the wrong things at that time of my career as compared to what transpires after that. The knock on me as a leader was always, you need to be one of the boys more. And that just wasn't who I was. And I know that that's the old way of doing things, but it's just not me. Our club went from being a professional organisation to then really driving an environment where it was full of love, empathy, understanding and care, which are probably 4 words that would be weird for professional, particularly men's sports teams to use to describe themselves. We started to celebrate each individual and human for who they were and what they brought to the table.
So Richmond make the grand final. You're the captain, you're doing a lot of media. What was the week like?
Kind of don't have words. Every person that watches grand final day hopes that one day they'll get to do that.
Lift up the cup.
So I think in that moment it's kind of like, what the hell? This has transpired and happened.
Well, not very often in the Howie Games studios wanders in the 3-time Premiership captain, best-selling author with From the Heart, the king of Amy, where he's dominating the advertising scene. He's here thanks to Amy, so we are lucky he's with Amy. Trent Cotchin, retired footballer, but so much ahead of you in life. How are you, mate?
I'm good, thank you, Howie. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. Retirement. This time a year ago, you were in the midst of an AFL career.
Yeah. Wasn't going that well at this stage of the year.
That's all right. You're allowed to tail off after you did what you did, mate. What's it been like? You're doing a great job with Channel 7 as well. What's it been like going to the footy and not playing footy?
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. I watch a lot of, probably more footy than I've ever watched since not playing. And there's still parts of me that go, maybe I could contribute. But then the reality sets in and I go, well, no, for the last part of your career, you'd get to a second half and be worried that the next ground ball you're going to rip a hammy.
Right, so that's what
So I kind of, as much as it's a part of you would love to be able to still contribute, I know that it was the right time for me and I'm enjoying being a fan. I think the game's in a great place. The competition's so even. You literally have to play at your best each week to win. And I'm enjoying being home more with the kids, do school drop-off and a whole host of other things that are challenging me but helping me grow as well.
How do the kids deal with school drop-off when a Richmond fan comes up and says, oh, Cotch, 29 and, 20, which is a great thing about what you've done. I'm sure you get a lot of that in your life, but what's it like at school drop-off?
It's a pretty good little community that our kids go to school in. So I think people are pretty respectful. There's still the occasional kid that gets excited.
That's cool, though.
I've tried to. My eldest daughter actually struggled initially with kids talking about her dad and whether we were good or bad on the weekend. And I think a lot of the time that kind of comes from the parents as well. So she did battle early days, and so my thing being in the schoolyard has always been, thanks, buddy. Yep, I know you love the Tigers, but I'm just a dad. That's why I'm here.
Yep. Just
like your parents. So I've tried to normalise that as much as I can in the schoolyard.
It's funny you talk about missing or not missing the game. I've had the pleasure of doing a couple of games. The last 2 games I've done at Fox with your triple premiership teammate, Jack Revolt, and it was last week was Saturday, Arvo, Collingwood Port, and it was sunny. And it was the MCG, and it was a traditional time slot, and he just wanted in, and he was bouncing.
Had the little itch, did he?
Well, you just know he's an excitable character at the best of times, and I said, whoa, and he's like, yeah, I wouldn't mind having a kick today, not forever, but just a kick today. But I'm fascinated when it's in a town that we live in, which is just dominated by football 10 months of the year. What's the day after you retire and you're getting to spend time with Brooke and your beautiful family, but then has there been a day where you thought, oh, right, I haven't got the structure, or what am I going to do next? And what's that feeling like? Yeah,
I probably lapped it up initially, and then I think the fear kind of sets in, what am I going to do when January and February turn around? And not my lowest point, but my time I struggled most with that was probably the back end of Jan, where people were going back to work, players were back into the full swing of pre-season. And I was kind of sitting in this place of, I've got that opportunity, but I don't want to book that in case that comes along. And I sat in this place of like, what are you waiting for? Like, just lean into the next part of your life, start booking things in and build a little bit of a structure around that. And, for me, routine is key, and it always has been for the most part of my life. But that was definitely important, kids getting back to school and being able to build my week, which still changes week to week now. But, I've got enough going on, or plenty going on, that I'm engaged, I'm excited, I'm motivated, but I'm also challenged, which I'm enjoying.
How's the socks business going? You came into Triple M last year with your Posy socks, and I really rate my ones. They often have a positive message on them, well, they do, which I love, but mine's got a gag on it. I want to know how involved you are in the gags on the socks. Any involvement? Before I tell you the gag, have you got an involvement or not?
They come across my desk.
Okay.
Were you not happy with it?
Well, no, I like it. I want to know whether you come up with it or you tick off it.
This is the Father's Day sock we did last year, I think, with the hole in one.
Well, yes. So why does a golfer need 2 pairs of socks? That's the question on one sock. Yes. The other sock, in case he gets a hole in one. I quite like it.
Yes. Well, that's what it's all about. Right. I mean, typically we're kind of focusing on the more serious side, but at the end of the day, we wanted to, appeal to a market across all kind of imaginations. But the thing I loved most outside of just the product piece is we've actually set up a fund now where every order that we have online, a portion goes into a fund, and we do piece of posies. So, we hear stories of people who are either going through a rough patch or people who should be celebrated in the community because of the work they're doing, and we kind of build an experience for them, whether that's, a day at the footy and an inner sanctum experience, or, going and having, there's a lady that had breast cancer, so we organised for them to have a photo shoot as a family. She went to one of her favourite shops. We put them up in a hotel for one night. So for me, it's like the impact that has on not just their life, but then their community, and spreading positivity that way as well. So I'm enjoying it. We've got a general manager in place now, so he's driving the day-to-day, which, was all part of the lessons for me as well, but it's probably not a strength area. So it's good to have people that, have those strengths. And
I don't want you handing off sign over on the gag. How do we get our Posy socks for those that are listening?
Weareposy.com.
Weareposy.com.
Or posysocks.com.
How important is positivity in your life?
Well, for me, it comes from perspective, and sometimes you do need help with it. Like, life is tough, but I think once we accept that it is and we find the good in it, and surround ourselves with those people that do help, we can all live a pretty happy life.
With Happy Lives, you've provided, we'll get to the start of your journey and your acting work with Amy, which I really need to get fully in depth in. You've provided so much joy, the drought baking premiership, and then 2 more. I asked you what kids are. I'm going to put you on the spot. Tell me a moment where, and I'm sure it happens to you regularly, you can tell me how regularly, where someone's come up and told you something about what the Tiger premiership meant to them, or premierships, and you thought, wow, this is bigger than just me and Jack and Dusty and Dimmer and Brendan and Peggy. Yeah,
I think until you win one, you actually don't, that football's a big part of people's lives, but it happens on a regular occasion.
Which is nice.
It is. And I suppose when you're connected more to a purpose rather than just wins and losses, you start to realise that these people, their week is literally determined by a win or loss. But I think the thing I loved most about 2017 was you've got these kids of parents that had really successful era through the 70s and into 80, and then forced their kids to support the Tigers. And for 37 years, they literally couldn't understand why their parents made them go for the yellow and black.
Hated their parents.
But that then, like, the gravity of winning it, and then they kind of go, wow, now I know why you made us do what we do. So it kind of connected generations, which was really special. And I probably didn't understand that till, not even straight away. Like, over the next couple of years, I really started to understand it. And then, I heard a beautiful story about 2 brothers who lost their old man during the 2017 season. They continued to buy 1 seat in between them all the way through the finals. But for them, it was just the spiritual moment of, doing what they loved week in, week out, even when he'd gone. And they're the kind of stories you're like, wow, like footy is bigger than just a sport on a weekend. And I've been fortunate enough to be part of a really proud and big football club for a long period of time and got to experience the absolute highs.
And I think the connection point through football, especially in this town, people relate going with their grandpa or their uncle or their mum or their dad. Do you take your kids to the footy?
I do, and I've been to a few Richmond games, but I've also been, I went to the grand final last year with my whole family, and it was weird, but it was really special. I just love being involved in anything that they're really passionate about. And, they love soccer as well. But football, Harper got home a couple of weeks ago on the Sunday and wanted to watch the Hawthorn North Melbourne game. And I was like, look, it's not a game I would typically pick to watch, but if you want to, let's sit down because it's just time well spent.
And are they Tigers?
They are. My son has a thing for Charlie Curnow just through the finals last year.
Right, Trent, I'm lucky enough to have two kids a little bit older than you. Far be from me to give you any parenting advice, but I'm about to.
Yes, I appreciate that.
This is a very important stage in your children's development.
Yep.
Because if you let them get around Charlie, all of a sudden it's, oh yeah, can we start watching Carlton? And then it's, can you take me to a Carlton game? Next thing, they got Carlton jumpers and you lost them for good. So my two young ones grew up when the Hawks were a magnificent 3-time Premiership in a row team.
Yep.
My wife's a big Carlton fan. They had nothing. I had everything, so I've got them. But I'm sensing a real issue here for your family. And once one goes, then the second might go.
Yeah, I'm confident.
Don't be overconfident,
I've
Cotch.
got quite a few blue bagger friends, and we know what they're like, particularly when they're up and about.
So show them the worst of Carlton fans.
Christmas, friends got Parker a little Charlie Curnow Guernsey, which I was a little bit concerned about. And then
That's a red flag.
Another friend took him, without me going, to the footy Carlton v Crows.
Without you?
Best celebration ever. They lost. So he instantly goes, don't like Carlton, but I love Charlie.
Gee, you're lucky.
I'm a Tigers fan.
You're lucky because if Carlton had got up and they had,
had
an
that
hour and 2
experience, I
hours
know.
in his ear now. We are here today thanks to Amy. The Amy had last year at the grand final. Outstanding. Abby, yourself, Richo, Dimmer, the Wiz. I enjoyed the Wiz flying the plane. As far as Amy clangers go, how did you rate your acting? Now we've got to get this ball to the ground. How did you rate your work there, Cotch?
It was solid. I was obviously inspired by Wiz. I was lucky enough to be part of his little
So
piece.
that's what I wanted to ask you. Were you in the same room as the Wiz?
I was. He was late to the filming, which probably wouldn't surprise many.
So Wiz had a clanger right off the top.
He started with a clanger, and then
What was he like when he rolled in?
Oh, as you would probably imagine, poked his head in mid-filming. G'day, boys, how are you? The Wiz, and then just went on a rant.
Do you love how he third-person himself as the Wiz? I rate that.
He might have made, the occasional inappropriate comment as well, as we probably would expect. But, I think they do a great job because Amy does amazing amount of work in the community with supporting AFL rules. So I'm grateful to be part of it, but that ad is actually, a highlight of the year because
it's a good ad.
The way they bring it together is really special, and I suppose I wouldn't partake in it if I wasn't lucky enough to have the success on grand final day because it probably wouldn't make a lot of sense.
So do you expect a call again this year? Do you think your work was solid enough to get you a second run?
I'm hopeful. Right. Yeah.
Not confident, hopeful.
I flick a text to the team every now and then just to stay on good terms, if
I'm
you know
around,
what I mean.
I haven't got much going on. I'm glad the Wizard was good. You talk about community footy, and Amy is obviously big supporters of community footy. Who did you first play footy for?
I was the Reservoir Colts and then played most of my junior footy at West Preston in I think it's the Northern League now.
So how old would you have been playing for the Reservoir Colts?
Started when I was 4.5.
So 4.5?
Same age as my son now, so I can't really imagine him. Well, he'd want to, but yeah, it was probably a little bit young.
What was the jumper for the Reservoir Colts?
It wasn't very exciting. It was like a royal blue with just... there wasn't much going on.
What's your first
Not
memory?
even a V.
Right, nothing. So what was your first memory of a competitive game of footy, if you cast your mind back?
Well, it wasn't when I was 4.5.
No.
I reckon I was making mud castles.
Yeah.
It It was on a street called Gloucester Street. Gloucester?
Gloucester, yeah.
Gloucester Street. I think it was, what was the actual name of the street? Name of the reserve. Anyway, I remember the ground feeling humongous. Banners were big.
Footy was big.
Diamond Valley League was very much pretty rough and ready, particularly back then. But yeah, to be honest, my first memories is just following one of my best mates' older brothers down and just being part of training and then getting involved in games. And I mean, I kind of am seeing that now with my own kids, and having them started their journey, I actually, whilst I was still playing, found this love that I kind of probably had missed for a couple of years. So, that's effectively, I think, where clubs do so well. It blows my mind how many kids do play now. Like, our kids are in under 8s and under 10s, but they're kind of never at the same ground, whereas growing up it was kind of under 9s into 11s, 13s, 15s. So it does make it harder to get there as a parent. But, I just love the environment that it creates. Like, you talk about the world being a little bit unsafe for kids particularly, or you do have some concerns. For me, footy clubs are still one of the safest environments for kids to just hang out and spend time and get better.
There's something wholesome about it, isn't it? Little town, Barwon Heads, and it's country footy, and so the boys and girls, but in my case, boy plays, and then he'll watch his mates play, and then they'll hang around and they'll watch the reserves, and they'll run out at half time and have a kick, and they'll try and sneak into the room before the seniors, and they try and grab something from the canteen if they got a voucher, and the liniments coming out, and it's like it's
the
good.
The smell of the sheds. There's nothing better, is there?
It's good
bit
stuff.
Of oil.
So, were you who did you support growing up?
I was a Geelong supporter,
That's disappointing.
Which was interesting because Mum was Carlton, Dad was Collingwood.
See, so who influenced you? This is the red flags I was telling you about as your
Dad's
kid.
business partner took me to my first game.
This is what could have happened to you and your young bloke with Cotch, with Charlie.
I know. So I also don't want to put any pressure on my kids to follow a team, but if they don't follow the Tigers, I'll be pretty disappointed.
Sleep outside.
Exactly right.
So he took you and saw the Cats, did he?
Yep, saw the Cats. My first experience at an AFL game, I got vomited on from level 2, so it wasn't ideal.
And so you were just hanging out and someone spewed on you?
Yep.
That's a rough one.
They were playing the Kangaroos, actually. Yeah, so...
At the G?
Had to have I think it was the G.
Okay.
I think it was the G. Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Right, yeah, of course it was. And who was your player?
Gary Hocking. Buddha.
Gary Hocking?
Yeah.
Right.
Just hard as.
He did changed his name to Whiskers, didn't he? That
Whiskers,
was the famous one.
Yep.
The famous one. So were you as a junior, and we always get to this point in the podcast, and I know you listen to every episode, Trent, so you know exactly what I'm going to ask you here. Were you a Justin Langer that had to work really, really hard as a junior footballer coming through, or were you a Ricky Ponting that everyone's like, oh no, we're playing against that Cotchin kid, he's going to dominate us? And no time for modesty here.
I was probably more of a Ricky Ponting, but I still worked hard, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you were always good.
I was driven, yeah.
Right. Talk to me about driven at age, because a lot of kids will listen to this.
Yeah. Well, I was tiny, so I had to make sure that, I was the cleanest below my knees and to stand out in a different way. And that was kind of always what my old man spoke to me about.
Did he play footy?
His claim to fame is that he got invited down to Collingwood the same day that Tony Shaw did.
Right.
But he would have preferred to smoke darts and work on his bikes and cars at that age. So
what's his name?
Peter.
G'day, Pete. Well done to you, Pete.
Yeah. Doesn't smoke anymore and didn't for a long time. But, that was just where he was at 17 or 16 or whatever it was.
So at what age, because most kids now, like my son's now playing bottom age under 14s, and they go to footy train, have a kick, and then go and get on with the rest of their lives. At what age were you conscious of, all right, no, this is what I want to do, or this is the work I'm going to put in away from just going to Tuesday and Thursday night training?
Yeah, it's a good question. I always dreamed of playing at the elite level.
Did you?
And then I was lucky enough to play 2 years of the under-12s Vic. So that's where I met Matty Cruiser and his family. So kind of from there, I probably had been, or there'd been a little bug put inside me that really wanted it. But until you're kind of 14, 15, I don't think it becomes more of a reality. But, managers start to talk to your parents and you start to understand that, maybe this could be a pathway for me.
What were you doing at school? How were you tracking? Like, what else were you
I
doing?
was always okay, but I had to work pretty hard
Okay.
to get good results.
And is there something you wanted to be? If you work,
I was
a
always
footballer?
wanting to be in property.
Property?
Yeah.
Okay.
My dad was a cabinet maker.
Right.
And I worked a little bit with him and realised how crap the pay was. So that wasn't that wasn't the pathway I was going.
Right.
And I was earning more than the apprentices at the time. So yeah, it wasn't the pathway I wanted to choose.
You know, when you go to the airport and you see guys and girls driving around just sort of little random four-wheel vehicles out on the runway, like picking up bags or with flashing lights on or whatever.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to do.
Well,
it could still happen.
Yeah.
It could still happen. Absolutely. I don't even know if there's a name for it, but I just wanted to be one of those dudes driving little buggies around the airport.
It'd be fun. I'm not sure if that fun would wear off at any stage.
I think it probably would after a while, but
it seems as though they've got a good little community down there.
Yeah. I don't want to be one of the bad guys that gets caught.
No, they all seem to have like knee braces
knees.
and elbow braces
I don't
on.
think that was my go. So you talked about managers. So tell me about that process as a family. How does that work?
I suppose your parents kind of drive it. And I don't know what the rules are now. I'm not sure how early they're allowed to approach you. But they do their best to get you early.
And so do you remember like meetings over a cup of tea at home?
Yeah, I remember Paul Connors, and I think it was maybe John Turnbull might have came up with him. Was he working with him back then? I'm not sure. Anyway,
So come to the house?
Came to the house. We had chicken lasagna. It was after a training session. And then every time I saw
Good
Paul
detail.
Connors,
Chicken lasagna.
every time I saw Paul Connors throughout my under-18s year, he mentioned a chicken lasagna.
Right.
And nothing else. And I get along well with Paul, but I reckon he probably lost it with just mentioning the chicken lasagna consistently.
There's a lesson for Paul. So you we're both at the same organisation now, which was ESP, and then it was TLA, and now as of last week it's CGI. They've gone through another transformation. Were you with ESP from the start? Or
not from the start.
Right.
Moved across there maybe 2012 or 13.
Okay.
Yep.
Right.
And I actually went there I had a little bit to do with Dan Richardson, who was there at the time. Then he came to the Tigers literally when I changed over to...
Right. He was my first contact at ESP.
Yeah. So he came over as a footy manager, so I got moved on to another guy and, but have enjoyed my time with TGI.
Oh, yeah, it's not CGI, is it? It's TGI.
TGI.
I said TGI. Sal will hate me with that. Sal Harris. TGI. We'll have to edit that, Tommy. TGI. So, again, for youngsters listening, there'd be a lot of kids listening to this that do want to play football or be all sorts of other things. What advice would you give as far as choosing representation? Well, like what worked for you and what impressed you and what were you like, okay, I'm not sure about that?
For me, there's no rush. I probably rushed into it, in my opinion, and got very excited about a few of the a couple of travesty T-shirts and so forth. Won me over. Free pair of boots. Got some Pumas early days. I was pretty rapt to wear a new pair of Pumas every few weeks in the under-18s. Yeah.
I recall those.
Yeah. So I would say there's no rush. Like effectively, the way that clubs and the AFL set you up now is that there's a system in place for the initial phase anyway. So you're a young kid, 18-year-old. Your finances are probably going to be looked after. But for me, it's taking the time to make sure that you can build a really good relationship with that person, and then, the runs are on the board with regards to how well they manage a player. So that I would just make sure I do my due diligence, which is probably a word 18-year-olds have never heard of.
Yeah.
But you will.
Talking about 18-year-olds, completely random question. Have you been watching your man Harley Reid?
He's pretty good, isn't he?
Holy moly.
I didn't know he could get off the ground until last week as well.
Big hanger he took in the square.
Yeah. He, I bumped into him gather round in the airport, and he was way bigger than I thought he would be, and like wide. But geez, the way he's taken on the responsibility, the pressure, the way he's playing, I kind of sit there and I go, geez, it'd be nice to go back and play footy as an 18-year-old with not really worrying about structures or just play on instinct.
Yeah.
Because it does change.
And we'll get to how it changed. Yeah, he's been incredible, hasn't he? It's funny, you talk about the size of them, again, completely randomly. I walked out of the footy, gather round and had a quick chat to Paddy Cripps because he'd just come on a show we were on. My gosh.
He's a ruckman playing midfield.
Yeah, and again on Saturday, interviewing a couple of guys out on the ground and just seeing how big modern footballers are. And we spoke to Aaliyah.
Big man.
I was with Cameron Mooney, and he said to me, I wouldn't get a kick now. And I said, no, come on, Moons, you would. You're a multiple premiership player. You would. And he said, no, but these guys now are so much bigger and stronger and faster and more athletic and more skillful than the players that I was introduced to the game in.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Really?
Like, Cripper's as big as our key position players were. So I think he's taller than Jack Rewalt.
He's huge.
He's about the same height as Alex Rance was. And you think about how much of a specimen Rance was, but he was a key back.
But when you're sitting on the bench or in the commentary box and you see one in the middle, you don't realise that. But you do because they're tackling you, Cotch.
Trying to tackle him when his hands are up there. It's nearly impossible.
Big boys. So you are picked up were you number 2? Was Cruz number 1? Okay, so tell me about your first day at Richmond.
Well, I was injured, so but walked in,
Who was coach?
Boy, Terry Wallace.
Right. Nice and tanned and ready to go.
It wasn't much of a facility that I walked into, to be fair, as compared to what it is now. A curtain separating the gym to the change rooms. Massage was going on a little bit further up. No door to showers. It was rough, but it was that was Richmond, and that's the environment I was introduced to. Walk into the change rooms the first time you see Matty Richardson and Nathan Brown and Kane Johnson and Joel Bowden, like guys that had been at the footy club and done a lot in footy.
How's Brownie? Obviously, I worked with you on a Friday night.
He didn't look at me initially.
Did he not?
No, I'm just joking.
Did you find him an awkward conversationalist?
No, he was all right, Brownie.
Okay.
I mean, probably the most intimidating figure for me was Richo, just because of
who he was.
The enormity of him. He's a big stature, but you couldn't find a better bloke, really. And I love what he does in the community nowadays as well. But it was an intimidating environment to walk into, to say the least. And being injured, all I wanted to do was prove being worthy of getting drafted to Richmond. I was probably lucky enough. I'd been there for a week as part of the old AIS program that AFL ran. So I knew a few of the boys, and Jack and Cheddar and Shane Edwards, should I say, through my time for that week. So yeah, there was a little bit of comfort in that.
So how far in, because you're injured, when did you play?
I didn't start running, so I got drafted in the end of November. I didn't start running till I think it was March the following year. And then I played, I think it was round 8.
Were you presented a jumper at that stage?
I was playing VFL and got pulled off in the last warm-up on field. It was actually a curtain raiser at the G, so I was lucky that we were there. It was a wet day. We were playing the Cats, childhood team. And Adam Patterson got rested because it was a wet day and I got pulled in. So
no time to have to think about it.
And it was probably the best way to debut. A good friend of mine drove from Moama. He reckons he left the whole house unlocked because he only had 2 hours to get there, straight out the door. It was last minute, but probably the best way to prepare for your first game.
We have got, in the high-tech world of the Howie Games, we have figured out how to put videos into the screen.
Oh, here we go.
So this is the first quarter of Richmond versus Geelong. What year are we talking?
2008.
2008. You are now a media star. So what I want you to do is identify the players as you can.
Okay.
You have not kicked the football at this stage, 2 minutes and 4 seconds into the game.
Yep.
Roll the videotape. Trent Cotchin will tell you what's happening.
Milburn into Chappie.
Yep.
Goes deep. Richo down in the defensive half.
So
amazing.
Richo's marked at fullback.
Fullback. In one way, out the other way to big Snake Simmons.
Yes, big Troy Simmons gets an opportunity here. What's he doing with it?
He finds a young Jack Rewalt.
A skinny Jack Rewalt in the rain.
Takes a bounce, but not a bounce.
Drives it forward
That's his best kick to Matty White.
Matty White gets an opportunity. What's he call him?
The zone.
The zone.
Yeah.
Right. And who's this on the lead?
Lids with the shaved scone.
Cotchin still hasn't had a kick yet.
Haven't had a kick. Rewalt looking for a little tick lead.
He
doesn't get it. Probably pissing and moaning.
Driving.
Goes
Who's
long.
marking? Who's
Richo
in the marking
competing.
Contest? Richo's got
the
the other
opposite
end of the ground. And then
just a little sneaky one under the legs.
And
a big cuddle.
So your first ever kick is a goal.
It is.
Jesus. Two things I noticed. One, Richo, I got from fullback to full forward, and the other thing I noticed is why you just said Jesus, because you look like you're in Oasis or Blur. I think is a fair. Talk about your hair.
It's pretty amazing. Like, that was one of Richo's greatest strengths, obviously. He was an aerobic beast. But it's pretty phenomenal, isn't it?
Well, it is, because I came in here to Tommy and I said, what can you tell me about that? He said, I just had a quick look at it. I said, wind it back. He said, yeah, Richo Mark's a full back. And I said, yeah, look who gets the ball to ground to Cotch, a.k.a. the bloke in blur. Now, Tommy's frozen it for us.
I think I weighed more then than I ever did in my career.
Was that because of your hair?
Well, I couldn't run initially. Yeah, my hair might have had something to do with it. I've still got as much hair. It's just on my back.
So what year was that?
08.
08.
Yeah.
Okay. How many games before? I haven't looked at AFL tables. You might have played every game. I don't know. How many games till you felt like you weren't going in thinking, am I going to get picked and I'm a part of this team and I can contribute?
I was probably fortunate because of the position Richmond were at the time. I kind of felt like I was contributing each week. Okay. And I wasn't playing much midfield time. It was more half forward, so there wasn't an expectation on, winning the footy as much. So yeah, I think I played the rest of the season.
Right, so you were in and you're away.
Yeah. And we had a really good back end of the year. I think we won 9 of our last 11, finished 9th. Yep. It was funny for our Tiger fans, wasn't it? But yeah, we beat Hawthorn, who went on to win the Premiership. So pretty much we won the Premiership in 2008. That's how we viewed it.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. So talking about that's the way you viewed it. And I think when you have these discussions, it's really important to point out that you're not commenting on those that were in charge or those that were around the football club, but just what you saw. And you can be as open or not open as you want. Obviously, a lot of this discussion we're going to have is about culture and how it changed at the football club from a team that, as you said, frequently finished 9th and wasn't able to win a premiership. What did you say? It was 37 years?
37 years.
To a team that did. So we're not denigrating what was there. We're just talking to you about what was there from a cultural perspective.
Yeah.
What was it like at the footy club in those first few years when you got there?
Yeah. Oh, I think as a young kid, you're coming in and you only know what you know kind of thing. So...
and you've now got the power of hindsight.
It's all in hindsight now.
Absolutely. I think it's important
I
to
do remember
that.
as a young kid walking into, say, for instance, going to a cafe down on Swan Street and there'd be a group of more senior players there. I would feel intimidated, like maybe they're talking, and maybe that was more of a reflection of me than what was actually being said. But the fact that I felt that way probably said something about just the way that it was back then. And I think most clubs would have been probably pretty similar. And then, for me, like Terry Wallace was a brilliant coach from the way that he saw the game, the ability to change each week and try and take away something from the opposition. And as an example, beating Hawthorn in that 2008 year where they were just so good at controlling the ball and their zone, and he effectively came up with a way to beat them. But we would chop and change every week, which isn't sustainable. And that was probably the reason that it all came to an end for him the next year. So, but I suppose, going fast forwarding to the latter stages of my career, it was probably around the lesson in trust, empowerment and alignment for me, the T theory. And that was one of the first things I learnt when I started spending some time with Ben Crowe. And you just need alignment in an organisation. And I just think there was, a little bit of ego. There probably wasn't a whole heap of trust in each people fulfilling and doing their roles, or people didn't feel like they were empowered to do that. So it kind of flowed through the whole organisation.
I saw it again. To come back to it, I did the Port Adelaide Collingwood game on the weekend, and Bobby Hill was just a class above anything that was happening on the field. Cotch, I don't know if you saw the game.
No, I didn't this week. Actually,
he was incredible, and I was doing it with Jack, and I just wanted Bobby to light it up and kick a bag.
Yep.
As a commentator, that's what I like to get excited about. And there was 3 or 4 instances where there's one to Schultz, who's come across from Fremantle, and he hasn't set the world on fire yet. I'm sure he's going to be a fantastic player for Collingwood. There he's alone in the square. Bobby's alone in the square, and Bobby handballed it to him. Schultz kicked a goal.
Yeah. And
then Schultz kicked a goal very quickly later. And he did it 2 or 3 times in the square, and I was looking at Jack, and Jack was just nodding at me, giving the thumbs up. I'm going, oh, Bobby, pull something out. And it probably illustrated to me the importance of bringing your teammates into the game, whether it's on the ground or off the ground. And I could see that that's obviously what you guys had, because Jack was nodding his head as if to say, this is the way to play football.
Yeah. Yeah, and it wasn't always. Like, I think even mine and Jack's relationship, as good a mates as we were from the very early stages, we I don't think it's quite the same rat pack as the Swanee Didac era at Collingwood. But Jack Rewalt, myself, Dan Connors and Shane Edwards spent a lot of time together early days. But then we went through a phase where it was like we thought that we had to, be the best player or contribute more than we already had to make sure that we were a better team. And we kind of had it all around the wrong way. You kind of have
way?
In-house competing. There was probably a little bit of jealousy or envy if someone was going well. And it wasn't like it was spoken or we would hold resent to each other, but I think there was this underlying willingness and want to try and make the club better, but we didn't know how. So that shift for us going from effectively I to we in the off-season of 2016 into 2017 was huge for us. And it took a lot of pressure off from your own performance point of view as well. But, just to create an environment, as Collingwood have done so as well, where other people can thrive alongside you is a really special thing to have.
I haven't got the exact dates in my head. When did Dusty arrive at the club?
2010.
2010.
Yeah,
Sounds
or end of
about
09.
Right. Okay. What were your initial impressions of Dustin Martin? And I obviously asked you that because he became the central figure in the Premiership. Only a bloke with Norm Smith's 3 of them. He's done pretty well.
Yeah, he's been a pretty handy player.
Yeah,
My initial thoughts were, I was confused probably. Yeah, the biggest knock on me was if you weren't programmed like me, I probably couldn't understand why or how or what made you tick.
So
initially, there probably wasn't much of a relationship just because we kind of lived different lives.
In what way?
I had admiration for the way that he played, and he instantly came in and had an impact, and I loved playing with him. And, even just, when he'd come over for dinner, I remember he drove this horrific Astra. I reckon it was wheel alignment was no good. I'm pretty sure it was on a spare tyre. And like the first time he came, I lived in South Street in Ascot Vale, and he would have done 40 laps of the roundabout just near my house, and it was just going. Well, I don't even know where that car is. I'm sure it's been driven off a cliff or something like that. But he was just different. He was a young kid. And I suppose the best way to explain Dusty is like he came into our football club as an 18-year-old, but realistically maybe a 13-year-old, but grew up kind of 2 or 3 years every year that he's been there, to the point where he was a hugely impactful leader and person within our organisation. And that's got nothing to do with his football talent and skills and the moments that he's grabbed a hold of in game as well.
I used to do the NAB Rising Star stories for Channel 10, and I used to say there'd be 20 odd, and they were great because you met these young footballers that have gone on to become the Joel Selwards and Tom Hawkins and Scott Pendlebury's and Dustin Martins. And I used to go and see the great shifter Kevin Sheehan, say, all right, these 20 odd blokes, who's got the stories here that we should go and talk to them. And he said, this Dustin Martin, he's going to be unbelievable. But Shifter would say that about everyone
in the draft.
Drafted.
Yeah.
This bloke's the next Wayne Carey. This bloke's the next Lee Matthews. And that's one of the great things about Shifter. He's such a positive dude. He said, if you can get some time, try and do a story with Dustin Martin. So it would have been Dusty's first year when he would have been nominated for the Rising Star. And his father, Shane, was involved in a trucking business. And we went out to the eastern suburbs and I hadn't met either of them before, and it was a recycling business.
Yep.
And we got some shots of Dusty driving the truck under his dad's eyes, and Dusty didn't have the neck tattoos at that stage, but his dad was a seriously intimidating looking dude, and I was intimidated by his dad Shane. And I'll never forget it, Cotch. I'm getting sidetracked, but anyway, I think you'll like this story. There was all these number plates in a corner that had to get melted down and recycled. So there's all these X number plates. And Shane, Dusty's dad, comes up to me and he's like, hey mate, why don't we grab one of these number plates, whack it on my car and go and knock over a 7-Eleven? And I've looked at him, and then he slapped me. He said, I had you there, didn't I? I said, my word, you had me. But, Cotch, the thing he said to me, of all those Rising Star stories 10, 15 years ago, the thing I'll never forget, he said, I don't know much about football, but I go and watch my son play, and I'm at the MCG, and I don't watch the game, I watch my son.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud of him. And it just showed me that no matter where you come from, how you look, how tough you may seem, we all just want the best for our kids. And obviously he's no longer with Dustin and the family, but it's really stuck with me that.
Yeah. Yeah, and Shane had a big impact on our lives. I remember the first time, speaking of Shane, Dusty was living with us and Shane had come down from Sydney.
Imposing dude.
Came into our house. He had some sort of tank top on, arms
big guns.
To the point where he used to say that he couldn't put his seatbelt on. He had to get his partner to put it on because he couldn't reach around because of his biceps. Some of the tats on him that kind of gave you a message without even needing him to say it were, intimidating to say the least. But you kind of knew that you wanted someone like that in your corner.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Dusty took so much confidence in always knowing, and it's probably a big part of the reason why, these last couple of years without him has been really challenging for Dusty, and I know that he still battles with that each single day.
I looked at a lot of videos, and there's the one, the final day that you and Jack are playing, and Dusty narrated it, and I was listening to it, and you hear his voice, and it's quite gravelly. It's a good voiceover voice, and it struck me. I know we don't hear from him, but I don't think I would have even been able to pick his voice. And he's a triple Norm Smith medalist. I don't even know what the question is here, Cotch. I would love to know more about him. I would give anything to spend 2 hours with Dustin Martin and talk about why he's been able to achieve what he's been able to achieve. Is he shy? Is he private? Why do we not hear more from him? And respect to him.
Yeah.
I got no problem with it. But when I heard his voice, I was like, wow.
Yeah, it was special, wasn't it?
I couldn't pick that voice.
Yeah.
It was really special.
He has so much to offer the world.
No doubt.
And his journey is incredible. There's so many lessons within his journey that the whole world could benefit from. And I hope one day there is a time where he does sit down and tell more of it and, some of those key moments in his life and the way that that's impacted him. But, I think back to 2018, we were going to a health retreat together and we didn't realise it coincided with schoolies for Melbourne. So we landed in the Gold Coast and still were a little bit unaware. And then without a word of a lie, 500, what are they, Year 12 students, just imploded all over him. And I was like, mate, just go. You get the cab or whatever, and I'll meet you out there shortly. No one wanted a photo with me, of course. But
who's the bloke with Dusty Martin?
He's a grey-haired guy.
Who's the old bloke?
But I think that's part of, he was such a recognisable face figure. And it probably doesn't help that he's so private and somewhat shy because that kind of bubbles away and makes it even bigger than it probably needs to be. But after that experience, I was kind of like, I get why he just loves to jet set over to the States where no one does actually know who Dusty is, what his personal life looks like, what his football life looks like. That was a really significant moment for me to go, wow, the enormity of that, pretty confronting.
Yeah, especially as a young fella. Well, if he ever rings and says, you know what, Cotch, I'm thinking about doing a podcast. Which one should I do?
I will say Howie Games.
Howie Games or Dylan Friends. I love Dylan as well, and he does a great podcast. I prefer he came on here, but if he chooses to go and
still be happy to listen.
I just want to listen. I just want to hear what he's got to say. When are you named captain?
2013.
Is it like a text message or a big meeting? How does that happen?
It was a player vote between Brett Deledio and myself.
Right. That's interesting.
Yeah. I think it was kind of player vote who should it be out of, and then it was another player vote.
So is it like a Biden-Trump out on the hustings type situation where
you've got to sell yourself?
Right,
yeah, absolutely. Not really, but
my name's Trent. I think I'd be a good captain because
I wrote this in my book. Ty Vickery was one player that he was a little bit different and very intelligent, to say the least. But he texted both Lids and myself, Brett Deledio, and said, "I'm going to base my vote on your response to this question."
Oh, now you've got me.
And he goes, do you believe Hitler was a good or bad leader? Oh. And I was like, oh, that's pretty heavy. I actually don't know. I mean,
gee.
So the thing that I knew is that Lids would have been like, I am not even responding to that tie. So I was just like, I'm just going to give a response, and that should be enough.
And that you reckon got you across the line?
It might have got me the gig, yeah.
So who tells you that you're captain of the Richmond Football Club, this amazing institution in a suburban Melbourne, a part of the fabric of the city?
I'm pretty sure it was Dimmer.
Yep.
Along with our footy manager.
Right. And as captain, so how you're not very old at this stage.
22.
22-year-old captain. So this always interests me when you're captaining people older than you as well, which is something that Joel Selwood had. You know, to captain Matthew Scarlett and these guys. You're captaining some serious names. What did you think was the best way to do it? How did you do it? And looking back, what wasn't the best way to do it?
Well, the way I did it probably wasn't the best. Oh, look, there was.
I'm sure you did.
I was too young. I think in hindsight again.
Who was the most senior player at the football club?
Well, Chris Newman was still there.
Okay, Newman.
And he was obviously the previous captain and handed it over. So, there was a pressure that came with that. He didn't want to stand on my toes, wanted to give us the freedom and flexibility. He'd done a lot of the work with regards to building what we believed was kind of our model and our leadership ethos. So there was part of me that felt a huge responsibility to continue that, to the point where, we all put our jumper on together. I think that still exists today. Maybe it doesn't. I haven't been in the rooms before a game this year. But
so all at the same time you put your jumper on?
Yeah, like our armour. And that was something that Newey introduced. But for me, back to your question, what I learnt later on in my piece was that I was trying to be the perfect version of everything, whether that was father, son, husband, player, captain. And I looked at all those incredible leaders that had either been captain or were continuing to be captain, like Joel Selwood, Matty Pavlich, Nick Rewalt, Hodgie, like so many guys that have been so successful in their own right, Bob Murphy. And I was trying to be the best version of each part of them. And I was like, once I realised that, one, it's not attainable, it's not achievable, and perfection is effectively a myth. It's good to strive for it, but it actually doesn't exist. That was huge for me. And then I started to understand, what are my strengths as a person, but also as a leader? How can I best influence this group? What aren't my strengths? How can I lean on other guys that do have those strengths? So initially I was trying to do everything. I was a loner, as in with regards to not wanting to burden anyone with the stuff. And that was probably the most crucial conversation I had at the end of 2016 with Dimmer after Neville Crow's funeral, where we effectively said, we've been trying to protect everyone that's in our life, whether that's players, staff, family, to the point where, we don't know how much gas either of us have got left. So how about we actually just change the way we do things? And that was a really significant moment for us.
So you mentioned 2016. We've got some fantastically detailed notes here, which I rarely refer to. But 2015, you make the elimination final. You get beat by the Kangaroos. Shows you how quickly footy changes. And then it ended. So this is the big, right, this is the Tigers, where finals bound, the natural, you think things in life are linear, which they never are, but you think they are. We've got to this position. Next year we're going up, up, up. End of 2016, you finish 13th. They're going to sack the coach. There's the, there was the threatening of the board, et cetera, et cetera.
Lost our last game by 120 or something.
Who beat you?
Sydney up there.
Right, that's not exactly, let's go to Vegas, boys.
It's not a tight finish, is it?
120-pointer.
Yeah, there's not a lot of hope coming out of that.
How is this for you as captain of the footy club?
Yeah, it's the lowest point in my professional life, to the point where, I didn't know whether I wanted to be captain anymore or whether I was the right person to be captain. That was probably more the point. And it probably got to a point where I didn't even know if I wanted to play footy anymore. I just really lost the love for the game. I probably were reading too much of what was written. I was distracted.
What was being written?
Oh, that I was the worst captain and someone else should be doing it.
Okay.
But that started early on in that year, really.
I will sidetrack you for a sec. How have you dealt with the criticism that comes your way? It's a really important point. I'll get you back to where we were.
I think as sports people, typically you're educated on it, but as human beings, we are programmed to go to the negative more than we are the positive. So
It's hard to override.
It's hard, but the way I picture it, any criticism that I receive, whether that be mostly social media stuff, I kind of go, well, if I just picture one of the most unhealthy adult people sitting in the back room of their parents' house still,
Yep.
I can kind of just deal with it in that way.
Yep.
But it's the people around you that it impacts more, in my opinion, whether that be your parents or your partner. That's where the challenge comes, and I think then it kind of has the double effect on you, because you can escape it to an extent, but there's always people that think that they're doing the right thing by bringing it up and going, oh, don't worry about what he said. I'm like, oh, I haven't heard what he said. What did he say?
Yeah, and it keeps coming back at you.
Consistently search for it. But so that, and then I suppose from a media point of view, like for me, everyone has a role to play, and they've got to find their niche in the way that they deliver news or make a story. And that's kind of how I've viewed it for a long period of time. That's not to say that it isn't hard and you don't take it to heart sometimes, but yeah, that's kind of how I've tried to deal with it.
Just on that, I'll get back to it. It's just popped in my head now. Obviously, you're in the media now, and there was a furore. I don't know what the right word is. It's one of these things that blows up one day and it's gone the next day with Kane Cornes. And there'd been something put out on social media where you were explaining something, and then Cornsey on the Sunday Footy Show, in what for him was humorous, had a crack at. I actually don't think it. I'd have to ask Kane. To me, it was more about the production values behind it than about what you were saying. How did you take all that?
Well, I didn't even know about it initially, and then obviously the people that it did impact had contacted me just to see how I was feeling, and I was like, oh.
As it impacted as in the production staff
Yeah.
and put it together?
Yeah,
okay.
and I was like, oh, yeah, it is what it is. Like, Kane always has lots to say about the Tigers, and in particular me throughout, the time that he's been in commentary, and that's fine. It's one of those people that you kind of go, well, falls on kind of deaf ears for me. But it was more so, well, the purpose of it was for TikTok, and it was meant to be kind of makeshift. It wasn't like it was shown on a TV show and was done. And they acknowledged that it probably needed to look a bit better after the fact. But for me, it was the young guy that actually put it all together, and I was like,
Was he shattered?
Shattered, like absolutely gutted. Felt like he'd let me down, and that was kind of my role. It was, mate, like, one, don't take any notice of it. Like, the fact that people are seeing it is suggesting that you're doing some good stuff anyway. And the reality is that this is the world we live in. It might take you some time to learn that.
Yeah.
And I think even, we had a guest on last week, and you look at some of the social media comments, and so much of it's positive, but they still have to leave some form of negativity on the back. So whether it's has a head for radio and it's like, what's the need? Like, but I'll never probably understand the motivations behind people, but I think it's attempted humour, and it's sometimes the Aussie way. But
did you see the humour in it or not?
Honestly, I still haven't seen
Right.
the actual. I think is the segment called Mediocre or something like that. Yeah, I haven't even seen.
Well, we won't pull it up, and
you can pull it up.
No,
it won't impact me.
Well, no, I don't. Should we show?
If I let other people's opinion of me or anything that I'm involved in impact me from a day-to-day point of view, I'd live a pretty unhappy life.
Oh, Tommy can find it. We'll see when we get to that, and you decide if you want to have a look at it or not. We'll get back to that. So
I did have a lot of current AFL players reach out on social though.
Okay.
And they said maybe you should review Kane Cornes' fighting performance. So it's not just me. There's a lot of people out there that are out to get him.
I went to that fight, and I got to tell you, I went to that fight because I work with Nath, and I respect what what Kane does, and I thought for both of them to get in there was
brave.
Oh, beyond brave. Like, she was a seriously tough crowd in there, and it was, there's two guys that are mates getting in there swinging at each other.
Yep.
It's something I would never have the courage to do.
Me too.
We were talking about, you were questioning 2016, and then I diverted you about criticism. So how did this questioning process go through your mind, and why did you decide to stick with what you did?
Yeah. Well, first I had to lean on people that I knew, loved and I could trust. So two of those people, one was Brooke's dad, who had played footy at the highest level with the Doggies way back when. And then at the time, Gerard Murphy was our leadership consultant. So I'd had lots of conversations with them. And for me, it was really hard because there was just no clarity in what I was thinking about, really. I was disappointed. I was frustrated. I was angry. I felt like I'd let people down. So that was kind of where I was at. And then moving away from that, I now see it as a blessing because it forced me to reassess who I was, the way I was living my life. I engaged with Ben Crowe, who's had a huge impact on my life, and the wisdom that he shared with me's been incredible, not just for me, but my family and so forth along the way, and many other people, I'm sure, with regards to the work that he's doing now. So had we not have had 2016, I don't think we would have gone on the journey that we do post that.
You mentioned your friendship with Jack while Tommy and I were... Tommy's very, very good. Tommy Dallard, our producer, at immersing himself, and it's something I try and do as well, into the person's life for just probably a 24-hour period prior to speaking to them to really try and understand what makes them tick. And he sent me an article based around a conversation you and Jack Revolt had at a cafe. And I hadn't read the article, and it fascinated me, the contents of what was discussed that day. Yeah,
well, I mentioned before that the shift for us from I to we, and it wasn't just your typical coffee catch-up. It was a cafe in Essendon, local to me. So Jack travelled all the way over from Brighton.
Do you still go there?
Big effort from him. Yeah,
well,
really.
Give him a plug then.
Yeah, St. Rose, very good friends. Dom and Diana, they do an amazing job. Been there since 2013.
There you go. We like the plug.
Just before we got married. So our first...
What's it called?
St. Rose.
St. Rose, right.
Yeah,
so people
on
need
Rose
to
Street
get
in
there.
Essendon.
So Jack came across the river.
I know. It's very surprising. I don't think he's been back since, actually, except to go to the airport. But yeah, we sat down, and I suppose it initially just started with, God, what are we even doing? And then for us, it was the acceptance of kind of going, the reality is we're probably not going to taste the ultimate success in our time at the footy club. But
it's a big thing to admit or even bring to the table. Did you say that, or did Jack say that? Well, you don't really know. It's just organic.
I can't remember. It was just part of the conversation.
Right. It's a tough conversation.
Yeah, it is. And it's.
This is 2016. You still got a lot of football ahead of you.
Yeah, well, I was 26. Jack was 28, maybe.
So you're thinking maybe for the next 6 years, if I keep playing good footy, but it's not going to...
Yeah, we said 5, I think, which was wishful thinking. And we referenced, I remember referencing Daniel Rioli, who just finished his first year of AFL footy, and going, how can we be part of creating an environment where he gets to do what we probably won't? Which was hugely powerful, but it was a genuine shift in going, well, it's actually not about me. It's about us. It's about the collective. It's about making sure people feel like they can be themselves ultimately. And then, from there, clearly an attitude shift for us, but also some of the, the things that were introduced with regards to, Dimmer introduced the Triple H sessions, which were the highlight, hardship and hero, which just fostered this.
This is something you had to talk about in front of the group, yes?
It is, yeah. And I'll never forget, and it's been spoken about a fair bit, but Brandon Ellis was one of the first players, if not the first player, to get up and, bare his soul effectively in front of the group. And he'd been there for 7 years, but I reckon there was probably only 2 guys that knew that he grew up in the Commission Flats.
Right.
So it's pretty impactful. But then he spoke, and it's kind of how it connects to, his purpose and so forth. But he spoke about how he would walk home the long way in a different way every day because he didn't want his mates to know that that's where he lived. He was embarrassed and carried shame about it. But on the flip side, he spoke about how his goal outside of playing the game that he loves with a lot of people that he loves was to make sure that he played long enough where he could get his parents out of those living arrangements and into something that's better for them. And when you start to talk about that kind of stuff, he was still pretty young at the time, and it just created better conversations, across the table over lunch. It showed vulnerability with regards to what people were speaking about. We had other guys who spoke about losing friends at a young age to suicide, but then the impact that had on having a conversation around men's mental health. And
what did you speak about?
Well, it's funny. I actually didn't get to do the Triple H because to start that pre-season, I got up and kind of bared my soul in a different way of vulnerability and just spoke a lot about the things that I am and a lot of things that I'm not. But that released so much pressure for me, and I spoke about not being the party goer, but I was the first person to come and have a coffee with. The knock on me as a leader was always, you need to be one of the boys more, and that just
I go
wasn't
and have
who
a
I
beer with
was.
the boys.
Yeah, and the feedback that I'd received from my manager, and you just need to be more involved in those kind of social events, and I'm like, that's fine, and I get it, and I know that that's the old way of doing things, but it's just not me.
Because you don't enjoy them, because they don't make you feel comfortable. To be honest, you're describing, and I have friends that would say that's me as well. Like,
yeah.
I'll have one or maybe a second beer, and then that's it. And
yeah.
I'll head home. Like, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? So I
yeah.
can relate exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I've tried to unpack this. Like, I think it comes from maybe a little bit of not trusting the environment as that night progressed. I don't really love the grog because it just makes you feel average. And when you have kids young, the next day always becomes a bit harder. So that's probably been a little bit of it. And then I think there's a part of me that doesn't love to see how your mates act in a certain way as well. So I think it's just a combination of those kind of things. But that was something that was big for me to move past. It was always the knock on me as a leader. But yeah, bearing my soul and talking about, some of the anxiety that I have leading into a game and the pressure that I'd put on myself. And
what anxiety would you have leading into a game?
Just performance, really. Wanting to do the absolute best that I could possibly do to make sure that we had the best chance of winning.
And when you walk off the ground and you don't think you've given your best, how did you deal with that as a professional athlete?
I felt guilty. I carried heaps of shame.
They're strong words, Cotch.
Yeah.
Guilt and shame.
Yeah, I did. But I think that was the pressure that I put on myself. And I think I valued the wrong things at that time of my career as compared to what transpires after that.
So this is what's always fascinated me about this Richmond discussion, and I've always wanted to ask, and it's never, when we do a pre-game interview or there's never the time to ask this question. It's not a big question, but it fascinates me. How does knowing about people's vulnerabilities make you, as a football team, able to kick more goals and win more games?
Yeah. To me, it comes down to connection and that trust that I initially touched on earlier. And we started to celebrate each individual and human for who they were and what they brought to the table, rather than, I think previously we'd you want guys to be pigeonholed into, we want 22 robots that are the Richmond player and modelled on a certain kind of way to come in and play for us each week. Whereas post 2016, it was more like, he has these strengths and then that complements this bloke's strengths. But yeah, that deeper level connection, I think, our club went from being a professional organisation to then really driving an environment where it was full of love, empathy, understanding and care, which are probably 4 words that would be weird for professional, particularly men's sports teams, to use to describe themselves. So I think that's where it was kind of transformational for us. But then it just built on, you talk about those vulnerabilities, and I think there was just a deeper level connection which allowed you to feel more comfortable and know your place. And if you feel comfortable in what you need to do and what your team needs you to do, typically it takes a lot of pressure off from a performance point of view.
I love it. Hey, Tommy, can you, when the two teams are facing each other, Adelaide and Richmond, can you just find that clip and pull it up in a sec, mate? Cotch is already laughing and he knows what I'm going to ask you about it. So Richmond make the grand final. What was the week like? How mad was it? Like, the grand final parade was out of control. This is the 37 years could be broken. You're the captain. You're doing a lot of media. What was the week like?
Oh, phenomenal. And Dimmer kind of set it up on the back of the prelim win. He just said, boys, winning a preliminary final is bloody hard to do. Making a grand final is incredibly special, and you just never know if you'll ever be back here. So instead of shying away from everything that's going on, embrace it. Like, just have fun with it.
Good advice.
obviously there's bits and pieces that you need to have sorted, whether that's ticket arrangements and so forth. And the club had so many great people in roles that really helped take the pressure off from that point of view, which allowed us to just kind of really embrace that moment. We did a team activity. I think it was on the Tuesday or Wednesday. Shane McCurry, our leadership guru, had brought in a guy that played bongo drums, but the whole team sat around in a circle and we played the drums. And I'll never forget
In grand final week?
Yeah. Which was, it wasn't like it wasn't something we'd been doing, but it was probably bigger than it'd been for a few weeks. And Basher Hooley went off on this and Basher doesn't listen to music at all. Like, couldn't tell you the number one playing song at the moment. Wouldn't even know is it Beautiful Things?
I think it is, yeah. Good by you, Cotch.
Wouldn't know what that song is or ever heard it. And he just went off, had this beautiful rhythm, it was amazing to listen to. Everyone's just like, what is going on? But yeah, just that experience of being in a circle, playing, and we were able to use that as part of kind of, we're all here, we're all playing the drums together, feeling the beat together, singing from the same hymn. So we were able to use those kind of storytelling pieces on game day as well. So, and then grand final parade, that was unbelievable. Call it 100,000 people along the parade. Mostly Richmond fans, really just lapping it up. There's
always a discussion about, who puts their hand on the cup first and whether you look in the opposing captain's eye or whether you lift your arm up first. So that would have been you and Tex, he's got the physical advantage over you.
Does.
Did you think about any of this psychological warfare?
That was probably the most anxiety I'd had around
on
holding
the town
onto
hall
the cup
steps.
Longer. And not being the first to let go of it.
So you were holding on as long as you could?
Yeah. So we...
You thought about this before?
Yeah. We discussed it.
I didn't know this was a thing.
Either side. I was on the left of the cup.
Yeah.
If you're standing there, and then Walks was on the right. And all the players knew about it as well. So when we did hold it up and then put it down, there was just a few last adjustments. He went, then I went.
So he was trying to do the same
It was
thing?
like a Mexican standoff. Anyway, I ended up holding on to it long enough, and I'd said to a few of the boys, he obviously doesn't know how much of an awkward human I can be, because I'm happy to stand there all night if I have to. So that was pretty funny, and it was that was the first part. I was there's a little win for us, and there was a few giggles from our crew, because I'd told quite a few of the boys that was kind of the unwritten rule. But yeah, we just had lots of fun, even Dimmer's pre-game and rolling into the actual game.
He was talking about Mount Everest, wasn't
he? Yep. Hillary's Steps are the last 40 feet, I think, of Everest, which, everyone goes, there's the peak of the mountain. I'm nearly there. And as soon as you take your eye off the next step rather than... And looking too far ahead, that's when you slip and fall off.
It's interesting because he's saying, look at your feet, look at your feet. Tommy, have you got that clip? So this was the much talked about later on. So we're just watching the video now. So there's a photo of you guys again. You look all relaxed. You're all smiling. Jack and you are smiling. The MCG, it looks like a glorious day. And then the famed power stance. So you guys break, and Brian's in commentary going, they're still standing there. They're still standing there. And... when you see Don Pike here, it looks awkward. Were you aware that something was going on across from you?
Well, they'd done it the whole final series, and we actually did address it during the week. We were just Emma Murray had said, dialing up the acceptance and making sure you don't actually engage with them, but, have your gaze kind of lower. And just acknowledge that that's what they're going to be doing. Don't be put off by it or distracted. And then, it had worked for them, so it's not like you're not going to continue it into the grand final. But you do wonder how much that tightens you up rather than where we played from, which was lightening up.
And that was a discussion, wasn't it, about how tight they were? And, they kicked the first 2 goals. What for the actual game, what's your defining memory of the game before we get to when the siren sounded? I know you've won a lot of premierships. Yeah. It's hard to cast your mind back, Cotch.
For me, the conversation for us, and I don't know whether we actually discussed it or it was just with a few or whether it was in my own head because it's all a bit of a blur, but I remember thinking, Adelaide were a really fast starting team and had blown teams kind of in the first quarter for a big part of the year.
And they did, went bang, bang, kick first two.
Kicked the first two. But I knew if we were kind of within 2 goals at halftime, we'd been one of the better finishing teams for the season. So I think we did go in under by a goal or 7 or 8 points or something like that. And I just had this really underlying confidence that we were going to run away with it. Now, clearly a lot needed to happen after that moment. But yeah, that was probably the moment where I was like, we can actually do this. Like, this is going to be pretty amazing.
Tommy, the second part of that clip is when the Premiership Cup is presented to you and Damien for the first time in 37 years, which, you know, you go down, it goes in history of the footy club. Tommy said it's on the way. We will just wait for the great man to, he's under pressure out there. This is, what's he grinning about? So it's the Pete Dixon film, mate. Here we go. So we're looking at the coach now, speaking and thanking everyone, and then this is the moment. You talk me through what's happening now.
Yeah. Kind of don't have words. Like, I think every person that watches Grand Final Day sits there and hopes that one day they'll get to do that.
Lift up the cup.
But I don't think I ever truly believed that I could do it.
Wow.
So I think in that moment, it's kind of like, what the hell? This has transpired and happened. And there's Hillary's step the last 40 feet or 40 metres or whatever it is. But, yeah, phenomenal. And it goes so quickly. Like, it's all such a quick blur. The lap, I remember, and being fortunate enough to go back there and do it again, you're like, we need to make sure we go really slow in the lap of honour because it went so quick last time. It went quick again. It just happens, yeah.
And that first time, is it everything that you dream it's going to be, lifting up the Premiership Cup with your mates and breaking the drought and being a Richmond, and I don't know the importance of the captaincy to you, but regardless of the captaincy, being a Richmond Premiership player?
Well, it's everything that I played the game for. It's a special moment, but what I realised is actually the journey along the way that is more special. You know, that day in itself was incredible and memories forever. But when you catch up with the group of guys that were involved or the people that were involved in that, or you're talking to other people, you never actually really talk about the day or those moments just after the game. It's all the little things that happened throughout the season, the Triple H stories, you know, in 2020 there was so many moments where we were bloody challenged, but that's the stuff that brings you together and becomes part of the powerful part of the story.
The second Premiership, so you get beat by Mason Cox, really, in 2018. It was extraordinary.
Unbelievable performance.
Yeah, extraordinary performance. But then 2019, looking back at that, you do your hammy 3 times?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, and
too many times.
Yeah, well, lots of times. Everyone was injured. Yeah. You were at one stage. You were a negative split of where the games were at. How are you dealing with your body failing you at that point in time?
Yeah, I battled, but I think what I realised probably on the back of that year was that so many times when I did a soft tissue injury, which was always a hamstring until my last injury of my career, was actually mental pressure, not really the physical demands of the game.
So the mental pressure was manifesting itself in your body breaking down?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, that probably the moment where I realised that to the extent was, you know, there was one occasion where I knew that Brooke was booked in to have, it's either Mackenzie or Harp. Must have been Mackenzie.
Reasonably important detail.
It was Parker. It was 2019.
Right.
Yeah. And we're playing Collingwood the night before.
Does know when
started well, had all the energy and the adrenaline running, but I think there was like this underlying worry or angst about how the next day was going to go. So I did a string early in the second quarter, I think it was, or last bit of the first quarter. So it wasn't ideal going into the birthing suite the next day with an ice pack on the hammy. And then the next one was when we were told we were moving up to the hub. Did my hamstring that night as well, just the day before we flew out. So, yeah, I think I realised that it was more so what was going on around in my life rather than what was actually happening in the game.
Great. As I said, he's rarely interviewed your man, Dustin Martin, but he talked about Erna Fox doco on the 2019 when your man, Marlon Pickett, played his first game of AFL football in the grand final. And you and Dusty were in the room when he was told.
Yeah.
Take me to that. When did you find out that Dimmer was going to play a bloke that never played a game of footy before?
Yeah, not long before that. And then
Bloody good story.
We had our meditation and peak performance session coming up, which was kind of lights off. Emma Murray would walk us through a form of meditation just in preparation for the game. And we had walked in, room was already dark, Marlon was on the ground, had to pick him up and say, mate, you've got to come into Dimmer's office. But to be there for a guy who, his story was already incredible in itself, getting to the club, was best on ground in the VFL Premiership the week prior, and then gets his opportunity at AFL level, to just see the pride in his face when he was told that news from Dimmer was really special to be part of. And then the performance in itself was unbelievable.
When Dusty passed to him, then he kicked that goal. I don't know, but you were there. What's the noise like at a situation like that?
Yeah, and there's not many players would realise the significance in what he did. It seems simple passing it to someone who's in a better position, but the gratitude of how that brings a crowd into the game, the team morale. Got to a point where he got to write a book on it, so pretty significant moment.
And what's a grand final like when you know? How far did you know in your own mind that you'd won that? You absolutely smashed them. Well, what was the result there?
Well, Jack always tells me he kicked more than the Giants did that day.
That's what Jack would say. So 17-12 to 3-7. So I know it's professional sport, but you will have had a moment in that game, and then you will have had a lot of time to savour that you were going to be premiers, which is a rarity afforded to not many.
Well, I take it back to the grand final parade the day before. I knew that we'd be on the other side this year, and if I shook Phil Davis's hand, he'd have to release the cup. So it wasn't quite as much of a standoff that year. I think the Giants they had such an amazing run through that final series, but you knew that they were going to be pretty worn out by the time they got there. And that's not to say that we had an easy run, but managed to rest a few players in the back part of games leading into the big one.
The hub,
yep,
as an experience,
yep, hard, but one of the great times in my family's life, to be fair.
Why?
Well, initially, we went there with the right attitude in just treating it like one big adventure and dialing up the curiosity. And we were really battling prior as a club and team. We'd built an organisation based on connection, and that had all been taken away, much like the world was going through at that time. But getting away and being in one location as much as we were kind of living on top of each other was the best thing that could have happened for us. And then had a little issue as a family with Brooke having a facial and that being outside of the AFL protocols. Not being aware, we actually asked for permission on it and so forth. So
blew up as it only could in the AFL world, an enormous story.
And I think, if you take a backseat and you realise how much pain Victorians were going through, and that's kind of where a lot of the feedback was coming from. You get it. It's still not fair, but...
how'd you deal with that as a couple?
It was the lowest point in Brooke's life that we've been together.
Sorry to hear that.
To the point where there was times where she'd locked herself in the bathroom, and she'd gone for a drive one night, and I remember calling Crowe and going, mate, I can't get onto her. I don't know where she is, and I'm concerned that we might not ever see her again.
Right.
So as much as I say that I'm grateful for the time, and I think it taught both Brooke and I a lot about each other and how we deal with stress and manage that, and how can we support each other in those moments. It was a bloody tough time.
The 2020 grand final, Richmond 81 defeated Geelong 50. You had 19 disposals, 4 tackles and 6 clearances. I should know what the margin was at half time, but Geelong to me were dominating that game of football.
They were.
And then your man Dustin Martin on the way to his third, Norm Smith. So we talked about him as a person. Talk to me about him as a footballer in the biggest moments.
I'm not sure, and maybe I'm biased. I'm not sure that there's been a better player in bigger moments.
I don't think there has
than
been.
Dusty, and probably Norm Smith's.
Yeah,
are a telltale
3
sign of that.
3 grand finals.
I mean, Hodgie probably was another one that comes to mind with regards to being there in those moments.
As a Hawks man, I love Luke Hodge
Yeah.
as much as I love my children, but I can look at that and say, well, Dustin Martin was next level here.
Yeah. Special. Like, just to seek... Like, there's one thing executing on the skill that he does at the time, but also just seeking those moments. Like, I don't think if he doesn't kick that goal just before halftime, even going in at halftime, it's like, I just don't know if we've got that in us. Like, are we cooked? And then, maybe it's just enough to plant that seed of hope.
Do you think he understands the impact he's had on the game and where, when he finishes, he will sit in it, or because he's a current athlete or he's not that type of dude, he won't really even think about that? Because, like you say, like that was, you blokes were gone and he just went, hang on, we're not gone here.
I don't know is probably the answer. I'd like to think that he knows the enormity of what he's done in AFL, not just for the Richmond Footy Club. But I don't think you can appreciate it until you actually sit back. And maybe it's in 20 years' time where you go, geez, it hasn't been quite a player that's had those moments like I did. But he would never talk about it either.
Until he comes on this show.
Until he's on Howie Games.
I'm going to crack him. I'm going to crack him, Cotch. I'm going to get him to express his, which he obviously does at the football club. Have you had a moment now when you've sat back, because it's very hard talking to athletes that are still competing about reflecting on their career. Have you had a moment where you've sat back and thought, wow, I have been part, and a big part of one of the most successful eras of one of the biggest football clubs in the land? I hope you have.
Yeah, I think I have. Yeah, and that's probably why it's easy to go. You know, when you make that decision to retire, I was fortunate enough to play with a lot of great players that didn't have the team success, and I think that's why you always just hold on to the hope that maybe if I hold on to one more year. So being able to make that decision and know that, you know, we managed to do what we did for 3 years, but it was over a sustained period of time was special. But the thing I'm most proud about is ours wasn't just a great football team. Like, I feel as though our organisation has, because of a lot of the brilliant people that have been within it, starting with Peggy and Brendan and Dimmer, obviously, but even just the extension of their families and the people involved as well. There's a lot of teams that have kind of tried to emulate what the Richmond Footy Club has done, and that's probably what I'm most proud about.
It's funny you talk about the premierships, and I've been privileged to work in footy for a while now, mate, and whether it's September at Fox Footy or September at Triple M, and you're about to experience this September with Channel 7, which is fantastic. And I don't have the understanding really, but I look at the John O'Browns and the Jordan Lewises and the Jason Dunstals and the guys that have, and Isaac Smith now at Triple M. There's just a difference about the way they roll in September compared to, but not in a look at me, but even when you're working on a show, you're all of a sudden directing your questions to the guys that have won premierships.
Yeah.
So like it or not, there's a separation there. And like Marlon Pickett could have been, you know, he could have walked away from the game, and Nathan Buckley would have played an amazing, phenomenal, wonderful football career, and Marlon Pickett could have retired after one game as a premiership player. In some ways it's not fair, but there is a real, I think there's a status to it.
Yeah.
Do you see that? You're probably too modest to even...
Having experienced, I think there's this warm, fuzzy feeling with the energy and the excitement that comes with, you know, grand final week, but also finals. And probably having not been there the last couple of years has been when I've had that burning desire the most to be in there, knowing how good it feels to compete and play well and ultimately win it. But I think there's the warm, fuzzy feeling that you get knowing that you've managed to have success in that way. It is special.
It's a great answer. And remiss of me not to mention in all these accolades that you're a Brownlow medalist. You now work a alongside Job Watson at Channel 7. And obviously, Job won the Brownlow. He was stripped of it due to the SARDA investigation. We don't need to go into all that. Have you ever had a conversation with Job about the fact that you and Mitch are Brownlow medalists? Oh, I don't know the right way to say it. And, well, he's not anymore?
Yeah. No, we haven't.
Right.
And I obviously work with Tim on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, and I tried to contact Job when it all unfolded because
What would you have said?
It wasn't something that I really wanted for, to be completely honest.
I think
and I
Mitch
still
was the
sit
same.
there, and you saying that about me makes me feel uncomfortable.
That you're a Brownlow medalist?
Yeah, it's just, I always reference it as a token Brownlow medalist.
Right, you do?
Yeah.
Do you really?
And I don't know whether that's me struggling to accept what happened, but I also, having known a few other Essendon players that were part of that at the time, and I know that you make decisions and you need to live by those decisions, but it was a bloody tough time for that footy club and the players that were involved in it and all the unknowns that came with that. So I have appreciation for what they went through, and I also have admiration for the player that Job was. He was, and particularly that year, whether they did or didn't impact his performance, I think that it's bloody hard to play a consistent year like he did that year.
It's a very caring answer. Talking about your role at Seven, how are you finding the media? The constant refrain I've heard over 15 years is from cricketers, footballers, all sorts of athletes that I've been privileged to sit next to is, how do you reckon I'm going? No one ever tells me how I'm going. And every athlete comes from a world of constant feedback. to in our caper now, it's like, if you get another contract, you're doing a good job. If you don't,
Not so good.
You apparently weren't, Cotch. How are you going with that? And the feedback, the lack of feedback, you're having to learn a new job in a very public position.
Yeah.
I think is what you're having to do, which is what everybody has to do when they step into the media.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it probably more than I thought I would.
Good.
Early days.
You're going well.
And feeling more comfortable each week that you do it, like any kind of role that you play in the world. Very lucky to have, obviously, Joel next to me, who, one of the most capped footballers that's ever played the game, but also just a really good human being.
Yes.
And is kind of on the same journey, although a year ahead. And then, Tim, who's been in the industry for a long period of time. Tim Watson and James Brayshaw, who have been incredible with regards to the support and the help. And, if you do get caught out at any stage, they're very quick to save you. So, it's actually, and then, the team that actually put together the show have been incredible as well.
There's a lot goes into it that you don't understand.
I'll take my hat off.
Yeah.
The work, and then you're kind of halfway through a show and they have to cull some of the stuff that you're doing and you go, oh my God, that would have been like half a day's work, and they've just had to just sack it because, we've had a great answer from a guest or whatever it is. So I have full appreciation for all the work that happens behind the scenes, but also the people that have done those kind of roles for years that I've been tuning into.
Yeah, spot on. We always finish.
I'm always trying to, I think it's easy to get caught up in post-football life where you're like, geez, the game's easy from up in a box or whatever it is. So I'm constantly wrestling with that.
What about critiquing athletes when you know how hard it is? I only ask you that question because I remember I've had the good fortune of working with Luke Darcy for a long time now, originally at 10 and now on the radio at Triple M, and he's fantastic at what he does. And I remember he said to me, I reckon as a former player, you've got 2 years where you can avoid giving your opinion on other athletes.
Yeah.
But he said if you avoid it for after that, then you will become irrelevant because people are like, oh, well, X is never actually telling us what he thinks. How are you finding that?
I think for me, like as long as your feedback or the way you're being critical of someone, if they watched it, they actually can learn or get better from, I think that's a really good perspective to have, and that's the goal, I think.
Yeah, it's a great answer.
Not that they are watching it, but they might.
Some do, some don't. We always finish this the same way, Trent, about what advice you would give to youngsters listening to this show. And as a father, you'll know the weight of that. And they might want to be footballers. I always say this. I try and give different examples. They might want to be plasterers. They might want to be physicists, chemists, pianists. But you've had tremendous success, and it hasn't come easy to you. It's been obvious in this conversation. What advice would you give to those out there, not just young people, but anyone that wants to have success in their field?
Based on my greatest challenge growing up, one, just knowing that you're always worthy and always have something to offer. And two, it's great to strive for excellence, but perfection doesn't exist.
Great advice. Great podcast. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Thanks,
people
Howie.
at Amy, I
Appreciate
can
it.
see why they love you. I look forward to seeing you dominate in the sock industry again. Where do we get the socks?
PossieSocks.com or wearepossie.com.
And are you running some type of studio as well? I didn't even ask you about
Core
that.
Plus. If you want to
Core
come in
Plus?
for some Pilates.
Pilates?
There's actually one opening up down your way in Ocean Grove
Is
soon.
there?
So
In Ocean Grove?
Torquay, Geelong, and now Ocean Grove.
Core Plus. It's funny,
Core
I was
Plus
saying to my
Studios.
wife the other day, I've been trying to throw some heavy steel for the last 6 months, Cotch, and the area that I have no strength in is my core. So,
Well, it'll help your surfing as well.
I need all the help I can get with my surfing, I assure you, mate. Thanks for coming on the Howie Games.
Thanks, Howie.
Well done.